Yeah, they don't give me a Hollywood studio to produce in, unfortunately.
I know the same thing with my camera on my laptop isn't great, so I usually use my iPad. So I've got my laptop and my iPad.
No. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Updates from the Federal Reserve. Questions can be submitted during the webinar by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Our host today is B. Kyle, President and CEO of the St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce. Our guest today is Ron Wirtz, Regional Outreach Director from the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis.
Good afternoon and welcome. Ron and I spoke as we prepared for today and agreed that we want to pause before we begin our programming today to acknowledge the tragedy that took place in Minneapolis on Monday evening, May 25th. In the last 3 months, life as we know it has been upended by COVID-19. Systemic issues in our society have been exacerbated by a loss of life and highlighted tragically on Monday evening. You know, we're still trying to break this down, as I'm sure you all are. And what we can offer in this moment is our solidarity and support of George Floyd's family. We're paying very special attention to all that's happening, and we'll be speaking to this more fully outside of this program. We just couldn't start the conversation without really acknowledging the situation before us today. And Ron shares our comments here. So if I may, I really would like to move on and welcome all of you to the program this afternoon. Our guest is Ron Wirtz. He is a good friend and a strong partner. Ron is a Regional Outreach Director for the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis, and his primary responsibilities involve tracking current business conditions across the 6-state 9th Federal Reserve District, which includes Michigan's Upper Peninsula, Northwest Wisconsin, Minnesota, the Dakotas, and Montana. And previous to this position, Ron was the editor of the Fed Gazette, which is a regional business and economics journal. Today, we're talking about the latest survey sent out by the Federal Reserve earlier this month, and this was a follow-on to those sent in March and April. So thank you to those of you who participate. These are really important surveys. They're all intended to gauge the pandemic's effects on business. Of course, many of the challenges identified previously still persist. And Ron will speak for about 20 to 25 minutes, and we'll have time for some questions at the end. So I can see my chat here on the side of my screen. Do feel free to add questions. We'll collect and share them at the end. Right now, we're scheduled for about 45 minutes. Ron has indicated we can run a bit long if we have enough questions. So with that said, I would like to introduce Ron Wirtz. Ron, thanks again for coming, and please take it away.
Thank you very much, B. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for your opening comments. The bank shares those sentiments as well, so thank you for sharing that. Thank you to everyone that came to this webinar. I really appreciate your time and attention. I'm also going to thank you in advance for some of the intelligence you're going to share during this presentation. I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we go. I really want to do a shout out to the St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce. They are a great friend to the Minneapolis Fed, and more so now than ever. The speed of the pandemic has really it's really taught the Fed the importance of real-time information. A lot of our data systems are not very well designed for that particular problem, and so we have flooded the field with surveys. I know there's a lot of survey fatigue out there, but luckily the Minneapolis Fed has been able to leverage our relationships with St. Paul Area Chamber and other organizations to get surveys in the hands of businesses. It's been really important for us to do that so we can have a little bit better on the ground feel for what is happening to businesses during this pandemic. We've conducted 7 surveys overall since mid-March, 2 of which the St. Paul Area Chamber has partnered on. Those 7 surveys, we've gotten 6,500 responses from businesses across the 9th District. And I'd also like to point out, we've gotten more than 20,000 open comments. So we've really found that businesses want to share information, not only just the click of a letter for a multiple choice question, but they want to tell us their story. We're really trying to listen, and we want to continue listening so we can learn about what businesses need, about what the economy needs as we go forward. So thank you to the St. Paul Chamber for your partnership. Thank you to anyone listening that has already taken a survey. There'll be more out there for good or bad, but we really hope that you can find the time and the stamina to keep taking those surveys because they're vitally important to us. So I'm going to start my more formal comments now. Before I do, I have to give you my disclaimer that these are my views and not the views of the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis or the Federal Reserve System. So a couple of quick themes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first I have to get rid of a little box here on my screen. I'm going to give you a quick look at the COVID job shock. We're all familiar with the fact that the pandemic has created a lot of hardship on business, and businesses in turn have had to lay off a lot of people. I just want to make a couple of quick comments about what we're seeing in the data. And then I want to mostly talk about the May survey of businesses, which happened earlier this month with the help of the St. Paul Chamber. You know, the results, I don't think I'm going to be telling anybody anything new. Generally, the general conditions out there right now are very poor. But what I would say is they are less bad in some sectors and places, and there are some reasons for that that I'll help try to explain. And then after that, I want to talk a little bit more about the measuring activity that the Minneapolis Fed is doing as a result of this pandemic. So in terms of unemployment, I'm going to get myself a little tool here so I can try to lead your eye a little bit. So here you have unemployment over the last 15 years roughly. You have the Great Recession here. And I think we were all very happy with this environment right here. And then COVID hit and you have this. So in 1 month, we've seen unemployment levels reach or exceed Great Recession levels. Now, I want to point out a couple of things. There's a lot of variation in these unemployment rates. My inclination is that they are going to condense fairly rapidly. You have Michigan already over 20%. You have a recent number in Minnesota that was only 8%. I don't want to say this is inaccurate, but I think what you're seeing is that the data systems might be lagging in some cases. As I'll show you in another slide, what Minnesota is experiencing seems to be very similar to what's happening in Wisconsin and the U.S. in terms of intensity of layoffs, and you're seeing those unemployment rates up closer to 14 and 15%. So I would expect either a large revision or a jump in the unemployment rate come when the numbers are released in May. Let me give you one example of that. So there's a lot of talk about initial unemployment claims. So you got two things working on the chart here. So these are the initial weekly unemployment claims, and they spike to levels we have never ever seen even close to. Hopefully we never will again. And then there's been a slow stair step, but even the last weeks that we have data for are still several times what we would have otherwise expected. But what you don't see is a similar increase, especially towards the top in what are called continuing claims, essentially those people that are in the system and receiving benefits going forward. Over this entire period here, you've seen about 600,000 initial claims, but in continuing claims, they are right in at about 425,000. So there are clearly a lot of people that are trying to enter the system and for one reason or another aren't making it to a continuing claims. There's probably a lot of reasons. Not all claims are approved. There are also people that probably put in an initial claim and get called back. And there probably are myriad other reasons as well. But this is a number I think that is still reflective, and I see this in other states where you've seen this really large spike and then a little bit of a plateau, which is, you know, it's good, it's just terribly elevated right now. So, and there are other reasons why I think the data is going to have to catch up to the unemployment data is going to have to catch up to the actual environment that we're seeing right now. In many cases, I think there's a pretty widespread belief that unemployment is underestimated right now. So let me talk now about the survey. The survey was taken, it was out in the field from May 4th to May 8th. And we got, through the partnership of more than 20 organizations, we managed to get 1,100 respondents across the district. For those that are not familiar with the 9th District, here it is here in the lower right-hand corner, Upper Peninsula of Michigan, Wisconsin, then all the way over to Montana. And we have responses all the way through that territory. Some places are more represented than others. We have about 700 respondents from Minnesota alone. So those results in particular, I feel very good about. So there's a lot of ways you can splice that data to determine who's impacted and to what degree. I'm looking mostly at firm demographics. So I want to look at things like what state are you in, what sector are you in, and what size of firm you're in, because as you'll see, those factors seem to really influence how badly your firm would be impacted. So the first question that we asked was revenue. And what we asked is, how's your April 2020 revenue compared to last year? And what you really want to pay attention to are the dark red blocks, because those are the ones that have been suffering the most. And what you see here is that Greater Minnesota seems to have seen a little bit harder impact than the Twin Cities in general, but less so than the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And you have here down in South Dakota, it looks like a little bit better performance there. Now I'm going to describe reasons why this geography probably doesn't look exactly as it might look on the screen. There are reasons, there are elements having to do with the sample and the types of businesses that responded that would make these results likely a little bit more compressed between geographies. One of those ways is that we ask them to identify the sector that they're in. Okay, and so we ask them to doing that. What you see is that those businesses that are consumer intensive, lots of face-to-face transactions, and that are crowd-based have really been influenced. Entertainment, food, retail, those are all the companies, or all the businesses that have seen the greatest and negative impact on their revenues from April 2020 to 2019. You see some that have seen much less impact: banking, professional and technical, manufacturing. And if you go back to this screen, those that have seen a more negative impact tended to see more responses in these areas, okay? It doesn't mean that state policies have not mattered, but it has been, it is the case where if we were to have weighted more of these responses, we would have seen responses that from a geography standpoint would be a little bit closer to each other. Not completely, but a little bit. The other thing we looked at was size. So here you have firm size on an FTE basis, and this was self-reported. And what you see, I think, is probably not terribly surprising, but the data still, it can be really almost jarring to look at. For larger companies, you saw less of an impact on revenues. If you're a sole proprietor, you, generally speaking, were getting killed. 70% of sole proprietors have seen revenue decline of 50% or more, okay? And that's a sliding scale. Very directly, the larger the firm, the more the better positioned you were from a revenue standpoint. B, maybe I could stop here just real quick. Have you gotten any questions that you'd like to lob over the fence?
Nope, go ahead.
Okay, sounds great. So then, of course, if businesses are seeing revenue declines, other dominoes are going to have to fall. And as we talked about in the first part regarding unemployment, there have been a lot of workers that have been put on either temporary or permanent layoff. And from a regional standpoint, as you would expect, it follows very similar to revenue, with the Upper Peninsula seeing more layoffs and more significant size layoffs. So it's one thing to maybe lose, 1 or 2 out of 100 people. It looks like we're probably seeing much larger shares according to this chart here. Not only even if you were fortunate enough to not get laid off, there's a very good chance that you may have had your wages cut. So even those fortunate enough to remain employed, many are seeing their wages cut. And the interesting thing is, if you were with a firm that cut wages, more than likely you were to see a 10% or greater cut in your wages. So there were a few that only did small wage cuts. Those that did, though, were more than likely to cut at least 10%. And that's a real notable, we follow wages very closely. It has a real a leading effect into inflationary pressures and things of that nature. And what we're seeing is not only job loss, but wage cuts as well. So then we also wanted to find out about reopening and any sense of normalization of business operations. This survey came out before any of the new policies, the shelter-in-place policies were changed in Minnesota, as well as virtually all of these places. So we were really looking for insight on what is going to happen when these things start happening. And one of the reasons we're going to keep on surveying is we want to continue to find out as these policies evolve, how are businesses reacting to them. And what we found out is that for the most part, they are taking a very, very different approach, kind of along the spectrum. You have some here in Greater Minnesota. Let's just start here as an example. You have some that want to get back to normal operations and expect to get back to normal operations immediately when allowed. Then you have some that are going to take a little bit longer and do so more gradually. Then you have another share that's not sure. And then you have some that are really expecting no immediate changes. And we don't know exactly why, like what might be the motivations. But what I think is that this shows that even where public policy might change to allow businesses to have more freedom in their activities, it doesn't look like businesses themselves are necessarily ready to just go back to normal. We also are very interested in this idea of solvency. Normally when we go out to survey, we're more interested in like how profitable are you going to be? Are you going to have a better year than last year? The conditions that we have right now are clearly very different, and simply staying in business is a Herculean task. And a success story, frankly, I think in our estimation. And so we really want to know, somewhat from a monetary policy standpoint and from a policy making standpoint, we need to know like how much rope, how much slack, and how much capital do firms have in order to stay in business. And so what we're looking at is kind of this less than 1 month, less than 3 months, less than 6 months. And what we're kind of looking at is these two darker colors. And what we found is that only about 1 in 4 say they have the capital to survive more than 3 months. That's a pretty jarring piece of data, quite honestly, and really shows the intensity of this pandemic. It's actually a small improvement, if you can believe it, from the same survey that we did a month earlier. So in early April, roughly about 1 in 3 said they couldn't last more than 3 months. A month later, it's about 1 in 4, so that's an improvement. We think probably a very large share of that improvement has to do with the fact that we had the payroll protection program put out. Now, this survey was executed actually before the second round was completed. So I think this is a pretty good snapshot, at least of the first round in the PPP program. And what you generally see here, if you look at each of these locations, what this says is roughly 3 of 4 firms that applied for emergency aid received it. So I think the real utility in that program, I think there were some hiccups to be sure, but for the scale and for the immediacy of the program getting rolled out, it looks like it got money to the places and to the businesses that really needed it. So I think from that standpoint, it was a real success story. Now, whether or not that's enough to keep our solvency high going forward, again, I think that's what a lot of lawmakers are debating right now. And that's frankly what the Federal Reserve is really thinking about right now. Real quickly, the 2 PPP rounds have been fairly different, even at the state level. So what you had in the first round is that you had a huge push of applications, and what you tended to see is fewer firms get larger loan sizes. So here's the average loan size here in Minnesota. Okay, here's the number here. I'm sorry. Here's the total loans that were received. Roughly about $9 billion was put out to Minnesota businesses, averaging about 200,000. In the second round, we generally saw less money go out the door, but there was much more focus on small business, and so we saw smaller loan size go out. So we actually saw a greater number of loans go out to Minnesota businesses. Okay, we saw smaller average. So we reached more small businesses which I think was really the intended audience for that particular program. Again, if you want to get money to where it was needed, go back to one of my earlier slides. Those sole proprietors, those small businesses, those are the ones seeing the most dramatic negative effects. And it looks like this program at least helped try to get more money, especially the second round, to those kinds of businesses. So where to from here? You know, there's we could talk about a lot of different things, but I think about it from the Federal Reserve standpoint. And one of the difficulties going forward, and I think for everybody, for businesses, for state governments, for federal government, in terms of thinking about how we move forward, is we need to know what's just happened. For the Fed, in order to try to set monetary policy, try to understand how this is evolving, we really need better measures of real-time economic activity. As I mentioned previously, we really haven't had the data systems that do a great job of tracking what went on last week or even yesterday. Now we've been working really hard the last couple of months to try to change that. So we are trying to get into more private data systems and also into state governments and other entities that have lots and lots of transaction data that can give us a more clear and more time-sensitive view on what has happened very recently. Again, if you think about when this has started, I know everyone feels like we've been in this pandemic for several years now. It's been several months. Okay, and so that the data that's there it has been very volatile. We've seen this absolute fall off the table trend in literally a week. So here, this is a chart of Open Table. It's a reservation app. Okay, and they collect data nationwide, and we've made arrangements to get that data for the areas that they cover in the 9th District. The disadvantage is that we don't get this data for North Dakota and South Dakota and Montana because they're not part of this system. So the data is not perfect by a long shot, but it gives us a better sense for especially for consumer activity, which is something that we're paying a lot of attention to. I want to bring your attention over here. So the Minneapolis Fed has been working a lot on this real-time data notion, and we think if we get it, it's probably useful for the public to get at least some of that as well. Some of it we can't share for confidentiality reasons. Some of it we can, and what we can, we want to put out there so the public can see the same things that we do. So if you go to minneapolisfed.org, there's a little link that will show you the COVID-19 dashboard. This chart and a couple others that I'll show you are on this dashboard, where we want to help the public understand what the recent economic activity is. Here you have Minnesota auto traffic. What's been interesting is that for the most part, auto traffic has been fairly stable, increased a little bit, but seems to be flattening out a little bit, both statewide and in the metro area. Heavy truck traffic, interestingly, has bounced back back to par and has been kind of hanging around that area. That to me suggests that's a very useful and I think positive development. TSA, for those that have been following airports out, maybe those who have gone through an empty airport, traffic at airports had gotten very close to zero actually. We're tracking now, we don't track passengers because we used to have to wait a month to 2 months for airlines to report that to airports for them to report to us. Now we've gone to TSA and actually gotten the checkpoint screenings, which is much closer to real time. We haven't updated, I didn't update this chart, but we actually have data through the following week as well. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to aggregate lots of different kinds of evidence of consumer activity. And these are just some of our efforts on trying to do things in a different way that will help not only the Fed understand the economy and the impacts of COVID in a better way, but to also then help the public understand that in the same way. So that's the end of my formal comments. And as I mentioned when I think I first started, it's that you're gonna now be the teacher. You're actually gonna give me an opportunity to learn from you. Every time I get in front of a business audience, there's something that you can teach me. And what I want to do now is we're gonna start a very short interactive survey. And the utility of it is that not only will you be teaching me, there'll be real-time results that are displayed so that you'll be teaching everybody else. It'll be a group learn exercise so that people watching and participating in the survey will learn exactly what the Minneapolis Fed does. So here's the actions necessary to do the login. So the first thing I need you to do is get your phone. I assume it's fairly nearby. And once you have your phone and you've unlocked it, you're going to send a text to the person that is 22333. Okay, and in the text box, type the word Minneapolis, and if the word capitalizes, that's absolutely fine. And B, as we go, once we're in and through this, I would love to get either your acknowledgement that somebody is registered and that this is working. So after you type the word Minneapolis, hit send, and you should watch for a little pop-up box that says you've been entered into a survey by Regional Outreach. Once you get that pop-up box, stay in text mode. For the 3 questions that I have for you, you'll simply type a letter and then hit send, and then we'll see results pop up. So I'm gonna move forward, and I may have to back out of this. I've had some technology translation problems with this program. So we should see the pop-up box shortly. Okay, so let me just quickly move out of here. If it allows me, there I go. Okay, so we're gonna try this again. And B, while, so the first poll is gonna come up here shortly. Just find the letter that matches what you think and send that letter, and then we'll see results pop up here on the screen as people register. And B, in the space here where while we watch survey results come in, I would be happy to actually start taking questions now.
Unmuted. There you go. See, Evie is totally on top of this. So I have 7 questions while you're waiting for folks. The first one really has to do with your overarching guidance. As you look forward and knowing what's happening in real time, how can businesses have qualitative input to help add context to the data and help us figure out where to focus? And for as an organization like ours, where to lean in and help?
Right. Great question. It's a difficult one. Personally, and this is completely self-serving, so I'll acknowledge that up front. When organizations like the Minneapolis Fed ask for your input, give it to us. And you have, and what I would say is what I've been so impressed with is that businesses have continued to respond even though I keep sending them things. The survey fatigue I know is very, very real and difficult for people who are also trying to run a business and keep from going out of business. That is, however, one of the best ways to get your input to organizations that are asking for it. We, the Minneapolis Fed, under our leadership, Neil Kashkari, has had a much more active role with lawmakers. And so the reason we're asking businesses is because we want to bring that viewpoint to legislators. And it's not that we don't have any particular agenda. We want to communicate what we think businesses are trying to tell us in terms of the smart policy making. So not only at the state level, but at the congressional, at the federal level as well. And so maybe
just compliment your organization, Ron.
Well, I appreciate that, B, very much. And again, it's only through strong leadership among all of our partners and the relationships you have with your business members that we manage to get that feedback. So again, that's a credit to your chamber, B, and to others that we're involved with. So it looks like in this particular survey or this particular question, your outlook is, it's mixed. And honestly, that I would be surprised if it were anything but. What has been very hard, I'm sure, for businesses is just the sheer volatility of this, the changing circumstances, and everybody having kind of a different experience with that. So that's probably everybody that has come in. The other thing that I am struck, though, is that the solvency, at least among this group, on net is positive. I think that's a credit to all of you that are participating. So the one thing also that I'm interested in is how has your current outlook changed? So I just asked about your existing one, but has it changed over the last 4 to 6 weeks as circumstances have changed? And I just realized, I think through toggling between those two those two different views, I actually skipped the first question. So if I'm able, I'm going to go back to my first question after this one. I think the slide advanced on me and I didn't realize it. And for those that are kind of keeping track of time as well, the portion of my formal remarks are coming fairly close. Again, I'm happy to take questions for as long as people want, but I think we should be pretty close to hitting that 1:45 mark. And here, just to talk about the current outlook, despite the positivity, I'm actually seeing that your outlook has gotten more negative over the last 4 to 6 weeks. So that's really instructive. All right, now I'm going to see if I can go.
An important question to dovetail off of that right there, Ron, really has to do with the timeline for recovery. And you know I'm a closet economist, so I'm a geek. I want to listen to you smart people all day long. And so when we talk about the economic impacts and we speak to the two fundamental factors that impact it, it's about health plan and policy, strong policy support. Those together will drive the timeline of that economic recovery and how deeply and how extensively we suffer through a recession that is not economically based, right? Which is just maddening. So as you look at where we are and how the trends have been thus far, what do you see as a timeline for recovery? Is there any sense of that yet?
I think that is, without a doubt, that is the question that everybody is wondering about. And I would be, I think, remiss to say that I'm smarter than everybody else out there. I don't think we have a good sense. I think what we're going to find out as states open, I think we'll get a better sense of what that timeline might look like. Excuse me. My boss, Neil Kashkari, I think we were all looking for potentially a quick recovery. I think based on some of the things we've learned, even some of the things that I've shared with you today about people's comfort levels of going back to normal. Again, there's so many factors that are involved here. We don't know how consumers are going to react. We don't know, frankly, how the virus is going to react. We've learned so much on both ends, even about how the virus is spreading or maybe not spreading. This is a very intractable problem right now. And until we have a better sense of not only the virus's action, but people's reaction to that, Neil, I guess I'll fall back on Neil's comments in that he's seen a much longer, slower recovery in general. And I know that's, nobody likes to hear that. I think that's maybe the more honest path, in that it will be easy to react if things bounce back quicker. I think what might be harder and might induce poor decision making is if we get impatient. Certainly, I don't think, I think we have to be ready to take action where we think there is good rationale. But again, we've never been in the situation, and this is a difficult environment to know what the right decision is in all cases. Let me just go back to my earlier presentation. Again, just very quickly. So unfortunately, the very first question, and actually I should have gone back and I should have discussed that last question. I got a little distracted there, I apologize. It kind of looked from that last survey question that people kind of agree that there are a lot of different approaches that need to happen going forward in terms of if there happens to be another second wave. And if there is no second wave, well then I think some decisions will make themselves much more obvious. In general, we've seen that COVID-19 has had a huge impact everywhere. Some places, unfortunately, some businesses have been hurt more than others. The quick recovery appears unlikely in our view, again, short of a vaccine breakthrough or ramp up. And I think a more gradual recovery is probably more likely, and it's going to really be driven by consumer confidence. And that's going to depend both on health trends related to the virus and economic trends. As more people lose their jobs, as more businesses go out of business, I don't think there's any question that's going to have an effect on what we're willing to do.
It's interesting you talk about the recovery. The regardless of if the recovery is more immediate, fourth quarter of this year, or more drawn out, fourth quarter of next year, what we can't get back is the absolute drop from where we were 2 months ago to where we are today. The recovery will re-engage, but as one example, data point, Delta is losing $45 million a day.
Mm-hmm.
So regardless of the recovery that is ahead for all of us, there is an absolute loss that the business community, that the families across the country are experiencing. That is, as you've mentioned earlier, never before seen in modern history. I mean, right? It's stark. Can I ask one more question for you too, unless you had a comment for that?
No, go ahead, B.
And this speaks to the diversity of thought and the diversity of size. And we've seen sectors within the community that have been underserved, not only historically, but also in the recovery in terms of federal monies. So when you look at the feedback you've gotten from your surveys, do you feel like you've been able to reach the diverse business owner, the diversity in terms of the different sectors, large and small?
Yeah.
How do you feel that's been?
I think we have more work to do in that space without question. However, I mentioned that we've done 7 surveys since mid-March. One of them specifically targeted minority-owned, women-owned, and veteran-owned businesses. And only in Minnesota, only because it took me a long time to get that same level of partnership with other organizations that could put the Minneapolis Fed survey in the right people's hands. So we did that survey in mid-April. I believe we had somewhere in the neighborhood of about 800 responses, the only survey of that scale that I know of in Minnesota. And I think what we found is it reinforced many of the things that we knew about businesses in general. The problem for these businesses, though, is that they are more represented in those industries and those size of firms that are getting hit the hardest. So what we do know is that minority-owned, women-owned, veteran-owned businesses, they tend to populate more retail, more food and lodging, more entertainment types of businesses. They also tend to be small. If you go back to my earliest comments, those are exactly the firms that are seeing the largest impact. So and that's been, so we know more. Unfortunately, what we're learning is that, those firms are struggling.
So on that note of struggling, you had over 1,000 comments that you were able to read through. Do you get a sense of themes that you perhaps haven't covered thus far?
Yeah.
And one in particular, any sense of general reaction to how their states are responding to the pandemic?
There definitely are themes that come out. It would kind of depend on the question, and I guess one example would be with the more we've asked our more recent surveys, especially we ask an open-ended question at the very end, tell us what we need to know, kind of. And I would say the theme in that more recently is getting stronger and stronger about allowing businesses essentially to be able to make the decisions on their own in terms of what they should be doing to react to the safety issues of COVID-19. That's been very clear in the comments section for sure. And there are others. Some things that we've been picking up as it relates to workforce is some of the difficulty of getting workers back because of the more generous unemployment insurance benefits. So that's something that we're going to be paying attention to as the eligibility rules expire in July. It'll be interesting for us to take a look at what happens to some of the hiring and some of the other things that we might expect.
A question for you about policy. When we think about what has been done with the 2 rounds of the CARES Act and the strong injection into pandemic unemployment, what we've seen certainly in our state, we're more prepared financially to sustain unemployment levels, for example, through late fall if we need be. There are other states I understand who are funded for maybe 30 days, right? So Minnesota as a state is proving to be prepared to care for the unemployed. I'm interested in your thoughts about, at a federal level, do you anticipate the need for or the actual receipt of another round of federal funding for COVID-19 pandemic recovery?
It depends on, I don't, right now it looks like Congress is certainly considering another emergency package. In terms of what they come out with, I guess I would say I'm probably best to leave that to my boss, Neil Kashkarian. I would be maybe speaking a little out of turn if I had a really strong opinion about what federal policymakers should do. I do think that Congress is thinking about another emergency package. I know my boss would be in favor of that uh, if the level of need continues to be as stark as it is right now. Again, going back to some of my earlier comments, the need, I think, has been very evident. That's why lawmakers responded. I think our bank and the Federal Reserve System was 100% behind that. Even if we can maybe argue about particulars, I think what was needed was speed and scale. That's what Neil has been talking about to anyone that will listen. You have to get businesses the things that they need now, and there might be some mistakes made, but a worse problem is to not react fast enough.
I have one final question for you, Ron. I hate to have to end it all, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time. And going back to the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, the only thing, at least in the last 50 years, we compare to economically. During that period, Minnesota's economy survived better and recovered more quickly than did most other economies across the country. That phenomenon has been studied, and credit was given to the diversity of our economy, and that we were able to recover. So given that context, how is Minnesota doing in the midst of this economic crisis when you think about the national landscape?
I think the best way I can answer is that everybody has been negatively affected, and to a very dramatic scale. Now, I think there are levels of degree where some may be a little bit better, some a little bit worse off. I think the better way to think of it right now is that everybody's been hurt dramatically. It would be, I don't think I could tell you where among 50 Minnesota ranks. And that's in part because this is such a fast moving thing that I could tell you, based on some set of parameters I have, and in a week, all of those things might change. It's that volatile a situation right now. I think some of the utility, though, of what's happening right now is lots of states and even nations are taking a very different tack on how to reopen economies, how to stay protected, things like that. So right now, if there's any utility I see, is that we're in an experimentation mode. And so hopefully we are going to be learning an awful lot about what is working. And as we find out what is working, I think what I'll be looking for is to see who's willing to make changes based on the best information we know to benefit the most people. And I think that can be a hard thing because there are some states that are taking very different tacks. And I think the difficulty will be changing a tack dramatically in either direction, regardless whether you're really come down on the side of Uber safety or Uber openness. I think whatever we're learning, I think we have to have kind of the intellectual honesty to say, maybe my position wasn't the right one, and this evidence looks like this is a better path, and how quickly can we come to some agreement about what the best path is and try to move down that way.
Excellent. Oh, unfortunately, we've run out of time. I want to thank you again, Ron, for chatting with us. We appreciate both your time and all you're doing at the Federal Reserve. Again, we're happy to support these surveys. You're right, we get a lot. We rank you so highly in terms of your credibility and the work that you're doing. So thank you very much for the time.
Well, and I just want to say thank you to the audience that patched in today. I appreciate your insights on the survey. I hope I've provided something useful. And more than anything, as business owners, as workers, I just want to say good luck. I've always been very impressed by business owners, small business owners. It's a very tough job, and the idea of trying to run a business in this environment, I truly can't imagine the difficulty. So I just want to say thank you for participating today, and good luck.
Well, thank you all for joining us. We have more conversations in the weeks ahead, speaking to business leaders in the greater MSP region hearing from them on how their companies are adapting to deal with COVID-19, how they're paying it forward in the community. So thanks to all of you, and we will see you in the trenches.